All right, let's talk about a situation you've probably faced. You've just built an amazing machine learning model. It's working great. But now you've got a new problem. So, do you have to start all over again from scratch, or can you adapt what you've already built? That's the big question we're going to tackle today as we dig into the difference between transfer learning and domain adaptation.
So, picture this. You've spent weeks, maybe even months training a model. It's perfect. But then, a new challenge pops up. Is all that hard work just gone? Do you really have to go all the way back to square one?
Well, the good news is the answer is a big, resounding no. We absolutely do not have to start from scratch. We can build on the knowledge our model already has, which gives us a huge head start. And this is exactly where these two key ideas, transfer learning and domain adaptation, come into the picture.
At their heart, both of these techniques share one really powerful idea. We can take what a model has learned in one situation and apply it to a completely different one. It's kind of like making knowledge portable, right? So our model can generalize and perform well even when it's looking at brand new data.
This slide right here gives us a fantastic visual for that idea. See, our model takes in data and creates this shared, internal understanding of it. That's the shared part you see. This fundamental knowledge can then be aimed at multiple different tasks. This is the secret sauce for both transfer learning and domain adaptation.
So let's go down our first path and see how this works. Path A is transfer learning. And the one thing you've got to remember here is that this is what you use when the task itself changes.
Okay, so what does that actually mean? With transfer learning, our model is taking on two or more totally distinct tasks. But the key is that even though the goals are different, that underlying knowledge from the first task is still super relevant and helpful for the second one. Let's make this real. Imagine we have a model that's an absolute pro at looking at a picture and telling you if it's a cat or a dog. It's learned all about fur, ears, snouts, tails, the whole deal. Now we give it a completely different job. Tell me if this is an ant or a wasp. The labels have changed, the subjects have changed, but that basic knowledge of identifying shapes, edges, and textures, that's still incredibly useful. So, to wrap up transfer learning, the task is new, but that core knowledge can be transferred. That general skill of just seeing shapes and edges is just as useful for telling a dog from a cat as it is for telling an ant from a wasp. Makes sense, right? Okay, time for our second path, domain adaptation. Now, here's the twist. With this one, the task stays exactly the same, but the kind of data we're feeding it is what changes. So with domain adaptation, the job itself doesn't change at all, but the data we're working with is just a little different. The goal is the same, but the context, the world it's looking at, has shifted. Here's a classic example. Let's say we've built a model that can read reviews of books and music and figure out if they're positive or negative. It totally gets the sentiment behind words like brilliant or dull when you're talking about a movie or a song. Now, we want to use that same model to do the exact same task, sentiment analysis, but on a whole new set of data. Comments about, say, a new phone. The goal is identical, but the vocabulary and context are totally different. People are talking about battery life and screen resolution, not plot twists or melodies. So, for domain adaptation, the task, sentiment analysis, doesn't change. What changes is the domain of the data, going from media reviews to electronics comments. And here's the really important part. Domain adaptation isn't some totally separate thing. It's actually a specific and very common type of transfer learning. Okay, so we've looked at both of these ideas. Now let's get down to the brass tacks and answer our original question. When do you use which one?
Here it is, plain and simple. You use transfer learning when the task itself is fundamentally different, like going from classifying cats and dogs to classifying ants and wasps. And you use domain adaptation when the task is the same, but the input domain is what changes, like our sentiment analyzer moving from media to electronics. It all boils down to whether the fundamental goal has changed.
And this quote from our source material just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the matter. The real magic happens because a good, solid, well-learned representation of the world can be useful in all sorts of different settings, whether the task changes or just the domain does. So if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Domain adaptation is a specific flavor of transfer learning. It's not some competing idea. It's just the tool you reach for when your task is the same, but your data has a new look. As we see these incredibly complex models being built, It's worth thinking about this. Maybe the next giant leap forward won't come from starting over, but from getting really, really good at creatively transferring and adapting the knowledge we already have. Pretty powerful thought. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.